The world comes knocking. "Hello," Johnny Taylor answered. "Mr. Vice President, we have a delegation from Moncito. Do you have time to meet with them?" Nancy McCormick asked. This was the first time she had addressed Johnny as Mr. Vice President. Johnny would make time to meet with them. "Absolutely, Nancy. Let's have them meet with me at Sue's. Oh, by the way, is Bill available for lunch? I may need someone to watch my back." "Will do. Bill is home. He just got finished with a class. 3 more black lanyard promotions today. He's excited." "Sir, we are now over 1,200 black lanyards." "Say 20 minutes. Nancy asked. "I have to get my act together and get there. I'll call up Sue and reserve the table," Johnny advised. The table was a gift from the folks in Riverside. They discovered John didn't have a comfortable place to meet 25 to 30 people at one time. They built and brought down a table with rounded corners that could comfortably seat 30 adults. Sue had more room than tables and welcomed the big table, knowing John would be having lunch and dinner there regularly. John and Sue's son George had convinced him to leave Seattle. Sue was very happy to have his family safe. "I'll call up Bill now, thanks Nancy." Johnny thought for a second and called up Bill McCormick. "Bill, can you join me for lunch?" Johnny asked. "What do you have going on?" Bill could feel the concern in Johnny's voice. "Got a group from Moncito here," Johnny shared. The men who'd stayed in Omak from the mercenaries were fitting in very well. They had the local phone service up and running most of the time and felt they could get another cell phone tower up also. "I could use somebody to watch my back. I'll be there in 5 minutes." Bill responded, "You buy me lunch?" "Thanks, buddy. I will." Johnny and Bill said their goodbyes, and Johnny started looking up what he could find on what was left of the internet about Moncito. He knew his dad didn't like the company, something about Agent Orange that was used in Vietnam. Everyone who handled it was probably dead, and everyone who got touched by Agent Orange had a medical problem that wouldn't go away. Bill came into the bank where Johnny was. He was sitting at his dad's desk. Johnny stood to greet his friend. "Hi, Bill. You do that flying thing again?" "Yeah, Johnny, you should try it." Bill laughed as Johnny shook his head. They walked over to Sue's Chow Hall. Johnny stopped and looked at the sign. "Well, he finally named it." Johnny laughed. "Again? Truth in the advertisement." Bill chuckled too. "Shall we play hard to get?" Johnny asked, and Bill nodded. There was a large group of suited figures standing outside looking expectantly. "I'm John Taylor Jr., Vice President. You from Moncito?" "Yes, we were hoping to meet with the President." The only man with a name tag shook hands with Johnny and commented. Johnny read Philip Roth Smith, Director of New Development, on the name tag. John turned. "I'm sure Nancy can schedule you in for an appointment in 2 or 3 months." He finished his turn and started walking away with Bill on his shoulder. "Wait, we came over 1,000 miles to meet with him," Philip demanded angrily. "Well, your trip isn't a complete waste. You can make an appointment while you're here." Johnny turned and continued to walk away. "Wait, we'll meet with you." Philip sounded defeated. Johnny turned to Bill. "Are you going to have much time? Today is our anniversary and I have to buy some flowers. 8 years today." Bill looked at the Moncito bunch and said, "If we can get right to business, perhaps we'll have time." Johnny loved it. Bill had reduced the importance of Moncito to just ahead of buying flowers. "Well, it is lunchtime. Sue's special sounds good." Johnny and Bill shrugged and turned back to the chow hall. The single black man and the token woman were both smiling as they filed into the restaurant. Both realized their time was probably short as the rules of political correctness were fading into the past. Moncito was part of the Eastern establishment and so far had blocked with the help of other corporations any return of civil order east of the Mississippi River. There was a strong movement to form a corporation with the directors appointing the president. As the party entered, Philip took charge and told his staff to move some tables together. "We have a table reserved already." Johnny stood in Philip's way. "This way." Philip took up residence at one end of the table. Johnny and Bill ended up with the black man and token woman on the other end. The other men in suits made the sides work. As they were seated, one of the waitstaff came up and talked with Johnny. He ordered a large bowl of smoked fish chowder for each at the table. They were served within a few minutes. "I ordered you our most sought-after delicacy, Fresh smoked salmon made with our local vegetables. Mr. Vice President, don't mean to correct you, but the potatoes are from Idaho. Bill was trying not to laugh. Well, that's local. Johnny watched as everyone reached into their pockets and pulled out a breath mint container, extract a pill, and wash it down with water. What are you taking? Breath mints. Several of the men shared emphatically. Just how dangerous are your GMOs? Bill asked. Last year, the Pope said that GMOs were poisoning the planet's food supply. Bill supplied. There were several answers of denial, but from Johnny's right came a thought. Yes, very dangerous. Both of our wives are pregnant. Are GMOs safe for them to eat? Again, the consensus at the table was, oh, certainly. But both Bill and Johnny heard the thoughts of the woman and the black man that disagreed with that consensus. Mr. Taylor, what we came here today for is to obtain your agreement to allow our products to continue to be used in the Western states, Philip stated. He pulled a binder of papers out of his briefcase and handed it down to Johnny. Mr. Smith, I thought everyone on the East Coast was more formal. We do not call the Vice President by his surname, Bill informed. Well, we on the East Coast are forming our own government. Members of your government have nothing to do with us. Johnny turned to Bill. Do you have time after we eat for us to take our visitors on a tour? Bill looked at his watch, then looked at the table. Yeah, I think I can make it work. 3 minutes later, Johnny laid a silver dollar on the table after looking at the bill. He looked to Bill, and both men smiled and nodded. A second later, they were on the catwalk on the west side of the Sun. What is that? Philip asked as he moved through the railing. There was a rush to be behind him. Then the railing closed and became solid again. Where are we? The woman asked. As Philip exploded, the black man said, That has to be a hellish way to die. You're correct. We think this is what our ancestors defined as hell, Johnny shared. What are you going to do with us? The woman asked. Take you to see God, Johnny smiled. Are you two ready? Bill helped Johnny get the group here, but Johnny was certainly comfortable with Four to God. They showed up and Gaia there to meet them. Hi, big brother. Hi, little sister. Johnny gave Gaia a big hug and twirled her around. She squealed with delight. Little sister, this is? He allowed people to introduce themselves. Tanya Jefferson, the lady shared. Matthew Winston, the black man held out his hand. Mr. Vice President, is this God? Tanya asked. Yes, come with me. Johnny held Gaia as he escorted Tanya over to the surface. Touch it and ask a question. I asked if I am supposed to leave Moncito and join the new U.S. government. Tanya was stunned. You guys are in alignment with God, aren't you? 2,000 years ago, my father was John the Beloved. He is the comforter. He is the president, John Taylor. He's the one who taught us how to come here. That's a myth from a book that's been edited and translated hundreds of times. That can't be true. Tanya had a pained expression on her face. Ask God, Johnny suggested. Gaia started laughing as Tanya's eyes got huge as she went through the questions. What is life all about? Tanya asked. God needs Christs. To become a Christ, one needs to graduate. Before we can graduate, we have to ascend. Johnny smiled. Jesus even told us to follow him. What will Moncito do when Philip and his group do not show up? Johnny asked. Bill and Matthew Winston had joined Johnny and Tanya. Moncito will send their investigation squad. They are licensed to kill, Matthew shared very solemnly. How about you guys? Are you safe? Bill asked Matthew and Tanya. The two Moncito staff shook their heads to indicate they weren't safe. Then it seems like we may need to go visit whoever might come at us, Bill suggested. Ready to go back? Johnny asked. Take a deep breath. The four were once again sitting at the big table at Sau's. The four ended up talking about what Sue was going to call the dinner today. Sue was looking for his identity, and he had repainted his main sign 6 times in the time he had been open. Virginia was convinced Sue was dealing with PTSD. She'd talked with him and felt he was on the upswing, and one day soon a name would show up and it would stay. Matthew collected all of the phones left on the table along with the briefcase and agreement. These phones might come in handy. They open up doors at headquarters. There before Johnny, a package showed up out of thin air on the table in front of him. Before Johnny had checked it out, an identical package showed up in front of Bill. The packages were marked with a note indicating that the boxes contained military-grade satellite phones. The notes denoted the phone numbers of John, Johnny, and Bill, and were signed POTUS in little letters underlined with a swirl. "That is certainly your dad," Bill stated. "How can you be sure it's my dad?" Johnny asked. Tanya and Matthew were looking on in wonder. "He's the only man in the world who capitalizes words that he feels are important and then would sign POTUS in lowercase." "What's POTUS?" Johnny asked. "President of the United States." Matthew and Tanya answered together. Johnny opened the package and pulled out the phone, accompanied by 2 batteries. He put them in and powered up the device. The phone came to life, and Johnny dialed his father's number. "Mr. Vice President," John Taylor Sr. laughed. "Mr. President, how long are you going to be with the Marines?" Johnny asked. "I'm done with the Marines. They've moved into Amarillo, Texas. In the process, we found thousands of phones like the one you have. We're getting them out to all the government people now. I have a new aide, Aeltono Sarah Lopez. I think she'll be very useful until she meets Billy Nation." John laughed. "Where did the phones come from?" Johnny asked. "It's something Treese had done while he was in office. They put up a dozen or so satellites all over the world just for these phones. Can you imagine spending a couple $100 million on a private phone system?" "No, I can't. We're having lunch with a Moncito delegation." "How's that going? Is Bill with you?" John asked. "Yes, Bill is watching my back." John laughed. 26 went to see God, 2 returned. These 2 want to work for the people. The first recommendation they have is for no GMOs and no Moncito pesticides. They are also suggesting Bill and I go to the annual stockholders meeting in New York tomorrow night. There'll be 6 of us, 3 with black lanyards, 2 with green lanyards, and Bill thinks I need to be tested for blue. "I love hearing that, son. Let me know how it turns out. Teresa's number is 004. Love you, son." John signed off. "Love you, Mr. President." Johnny closed the phone. Just then, machine gun fire could be heard. Both Johnny's and Bill's phones went off. They answered Jenny, screaming, "Come quick, a bunch of men are trying to shoot their way into town on the Highway 20 bridge." Johnny and Bill both stood. "Matthew, you're with Bill. Tanya, you ride with me. Come on," Johnny directed. At the river, just before the shooting occurred, the young gang had completed bringing in 18,000 fish in 18 days by way of the nets. They were cleaning up the workspace and putting away the net just before they grabbed fishing rods for the day. There were no more ice chests, and all the home freezers in the area were full. Sue shared that he still had room in his freezer, so he got permission to bring a stainless steel fruit tub to be filled up with fish to be served at his restaurant. So for the last 3 days, the kids had worked to fill up Sue's stockpile and had a blast doing it. Word was that the fishing was going to end on Friday. Even Frank Johnston had returned and was assisting with obtaining salmon eggs for the hatchery. He liked to catch one every evening. He added it to the fish being smoked and then made into chowder. Billy Nation had gotten the old fish hatchery up and running. The artesian well had dried up shortly after St. Helens had blown her stack in 1980. That day had changed a lot of the landscape. Many wells had dried up or gave very little. Tony was going to get a fishing rod when he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He looked around and saw a bunch of men watching from the south side of the river. Tony handed the rod to his brother Ben. Stephen and Ben had gotten permission to be here these last 2 days. Tony had woken that morning with a dream of standing in a battle on a bridge. He turned and walked up to the bridge on the north side. As he turned to step onto the bridge, he paused and looked back to see Brad and Gloria on his right and Willow on his left. The rest of the group was following him, even the little kids and the men and women of the Over the Hill gang, including Big Henry and Mr. Johnston. He handed Willa his cell phone. "Call Mom, we may have wounded." Over the past couple of days, Tony had been taking everybody up to see God as evening classes. The young boys and girls were keeping up on their schoolwork and learning all kinds of things. They had been to see God 14 times since they started fishing. They knew they had to stop evil, and this bad bunch of men with guns was before them. So they stepped up to meet the threat. Tony stopped in the center of the bridge. The rough-looking men were bunched up about 50 feet away. The men were convicts who'd been released from prison in Walla Walla. They, without knowing it, had followed Scott Tennis to the little town of Omak. They'd started with over 250 and had their ranks reduced to 178 when they turned on the guards. They had the time and manpower to kill all the guards and take the weapons they found. The convicts had attempted to attack Mallet, Monsey, and Brewster, all south of Omak. In each of those small towns was a dedicated group following the path of John Taylor. The convicts had not fared well, and their number was down to 99 men. With the arsenal they carried, they'd left dozens of people abused, raped, and brutally murdered in their wake. When they saw a group of boys and girls and just over a dozen old people, their assumption was this was going to be a cakewalk. The plan was to use a big slingshot and send a glass jug of gasoline, as in the Molotov cocktail. They thought the kids would run or die. The big slingshot was mounted on a telephone repair truck and was part of the lift basket. Everything got quiet, and Tony looked at the kids lined up to the left and the right. He spotted his brother Ben on his left and Stephen Nation on the right. Tony took a big breath, then screamed, "Shields up, just as Papa John taught us!" The adults were standing behind the kids, making the second line. Some high school kids were here to package up yesterday's catch. They, too, had joined the ranks. "Your mom and Virginia are on the way," Willa whispered. Tony nodded and gave Willa a quick smile. "We got your back, big fisherman," Brad spoke quietly, and those who heard him nodded in agreement. From behind him, Tony heard Big Henry say, "Look up there." From atop the truck 50 feet away, a big man yelled, "We want to enter your little town, please." "No!" Tony yelled back, "Shields up!" Tony looked up at the lift basket on the service truck. The man in the basket was giving the OK hand sign to another man in the center. The man in the lift basket lit something, and then he must have hit the trigger. What everyone saw was a glass-gallon jug with golden liquid with a burning rag jammed in the top. Tony and his adopted father, John Taylor, both had a telekinetic ability, and John felt that Johnny had some of that ability also. Tony captured that jug with his abilities and slammed it back into the basket. The fireball consumed the man in the basket. The screaming only lasted a few seconds. One of the men to Tony's left opened fire with his M16. The rest of the convicts followed suit, opening fire on the young army from almost 100 weapons. The kids were not returning many of the rounds, but 1 in 20 was finding the convicts. Many of the convicts had been hit more than once, yet they kept reloading. Tony screamed, "Remember your shield. Focus when you reflect the bullets back. Push and aim." Tony looked at the bridge surface and realized it was littered with spent bullets. Tony also realized the leader who'd yelled at him was on the ground and not moving. The M16 started up again, and this time the kids did much better, returning around 1 round in 10 back to the bad guys. Very quickly, things quieted as the echoes returning from the surrounding hills slowly lessened and then ceased. Some of the bad men were moaning, and a few were writhing on the bridge deck. One man stood up and fired off a full clip of 30 rounds from his M16. 5 rounds were returned, but before he died, there were 2 or 3 screams from the kids. "Keep your shields up!" Tony screamed again. He walked forward and turned around. 2 men hurried by. They had 9mm pistols at the ready. They wore vests that had Seattle Police on the back. "Who is injured?" "We got one down over here." Willa and Gloria were off like a shot in that direction to Tony's left. From Tony's right, he heard, "We got 2 injured over here, both minor. I've been hit, but it's nothing to write home about." Seth Wilson sounded very discouraged. "Are you okay, Seth?" Tony asked. "Yeah, just a scratch. But my camera is toast. I don't know if we can replace it. I've got another one that's in the car. It's a lot older." Seth sounded disgusted. "You okay, son?" Tony started to tear up as he looked up and saw Jenny. "Yeah, we got 1 down over there to my left. 2 to my right are wounded, and Seth Wilson has a scratch." Jenny hugged Tony, then went off to the left, and Virginia also hugged Tony and went off to the right. Ben, Stephen, and Johnny all converged on Tony at about the same time. Tony picked up Ben, and Johnny picked up Stephen. Bill McCormick was standing watching 8 of his guys, all wearing blue Seattle Police vests, holding onto weapons at the ready as they checked each of the bodies. There were 3 more shots. Only these were to put the convicts out of their misery. Jenny and Virginia healed the wounds and afterward met with Tony for a few minutes. We are going to head south to see if we can save others. Be careful, Mom. You too, Virginia. Tony yelled after them as they ran to Jenny's new car. A few minutes later, Tony saw his dad and a woman materialize right in front of him. Hi, Dad. How are you guys doing? The woman wore a Marine's uniform and her badge read, Lieutenant Sarah Lopez. I don't know, Tony shared. Got the weight of the world on your shoulders? John asked. Feels like it, Tony shared. John gathered Tony, while he was still holding onto Ben, into a hug. How are you doing, Ben? Tony saved my life. He screamed out, shields up, just before the shooting started. Ben shared, me too, Stephen shared. John put a black lanyard around Tony's neck. He gave Johnny a great big smile and a wink. Don't feel bad, boys. He saved my life too. Seth Wilson laughed. You okay, Seth? John Taylor asked. No, I lost my camera. It got shot, damn it. Seth held out his Canon. A bullet had gone through the battery compartment. You got another battery? John asked. Seth reached into his pocket and pulled his spare out. I have 4 more in the car. John went to one knee and focused on the camera. John and Billy Nation came onto the scene. Margaret and Maiden Nation were right behind the 2 leaders of the people. There were close to 400 people gathered. Mr. President, is he here? Lieutenant Lopez asked. John was finished with the camera. He was still on one knee. He looked up at Sarah Lopez and laughed. Sarah, I don't think anything or anyone could stop destiny if they even knew what to stop. That's Willa over there. She looks just like she did in my vision. Beautiful young lady. Oh, there, she hugged a man, and the other man picked up Stephen Nation. He must be the chief. Sarah was giving a step-by-step report. Yep, there's your man. Come on, I'll introduce you. John Taylor laughed. Oh my gosh, Sarah whispered. Do I look okay? John laughed. Chief, I leave town and you invite a bunch of convicts in? John Taylor laughed. Seth was there interviewing everyone with his digital recorder. John handed him his camera. John thought the man's heart might have stopped. He'd certainly stopped breathing as he put the memory card back in and then the spare battery from his pocket. He looked through the viewfinder, then lowered it and sheepishly turned the camera on. Everyone was watching Seth as his second look through the viewfinder, he took a picture. He opened the screen on the camera and looked at the quality. You are an amazing man, Mr. President. Seth was smiling so hard his face hurt. What can I do for you? Report to the world what you are seeing. Give me a call when you have some time. I want to bring you up to date on what we know is happening in the outside world. John shook hands with the reporter. Thank you, Mr. President. Seth Wilson smiled again. Just as John was going to shake hands with the chief, his phone rang. John excused himself and asked the chief to listen in. He answered the call from Jenny. Hello, honey. John, we brought a family of 4 back to life about 3 miles out of town. They have a 10-year-old boy. We think he's there somewhere. Jenny was angry. John, there is something else. Our sheriff was notified yesterday by some folks from Mallet that those convicts were headed for Omak. Jenny, I have the chief here. Tell him what you just told me. John handed the phone to the chief, and he had Seth Wilson listen in on what Jenny was reporting. Jenny repeated what she had told her husband. Jenny, do you have the names of who told you this? Yes, I know the mayor and one of the Mallet Town councilmen and Bob from the county board. There were others, but you didn't get their names. It doesn't matter. If those 3 can agree to something, then it must be the truth. I'll give you back to John. See you soon? John asked. Okay, love you. John hung up his phone. Lieutenant Lopez, this is William Nation. Bill, this is Sarah Lopez. We have a 10-year-old boy somewhere nearby, very possibly in one of these trucks. Please find him, John directed. The chief stood with John and asked, You're playing Cupid again? Sarah had a dream. She was being introduced to a man's daughter. The girl was called Willa. It was on a bridge. She was quite certain that the man would become her husband. Billy's wife died in childbirth. Look at them. They are going to get everybody to help. I'm all for this match. Thank you, friend John Taylor, White Eagle, Mr. President. I was thinking maybe it's time to let Billy take over the mayor's position, John suggested. Let me fill in as county exec for you? John Nation asked. No, I was thinking more like governor of Washington, John Taylor chuckled. Oh, shit. John Nation's comment attracted both his wife and mother. What is it, son? Maiden Nation asked. John is thinking about making me the governor, Mom, John Nation shared. Margaret covered her mouth with her hand, but her eyes were full of joy. Maiden turned towards John Taylor. He would make a good governor for you. For all of us. He cares. I'd vote for him. Maiden Nation said, I'd vote for you too. John Taylor, because you care too. John laughed and hugged Maiden. In your second life, you will be known as the Wise Bear. Thank you, White Eagle. That feels correct. Maiden Nation smiled. Maybe the very Wise Bear. John looked towards all the vehicles that the convicts brought, and little Mother Bear is leading our lost child. She will guide the big fishermen in all things. We need to make sure they are mated soon. For the little Mother Bear will break all rules to be one with big fishermen. Maiden nodded knowingly. Perhaps a marriage on Sunday? John looked around and got approval from all. All parties present realized Bill Nation, as well as Jenny and Tony's siblings, would also have to agree. When 10-year-old Terry Thompson reached John Taylor, John kneeled and hugged the little boy. The boy reeked as he had been locked away in a metal box for almost a day. Your mom and dad will be happy to see you again, John shared. They're alive? Terry asked. Yes, they are. Tony and Willa are going to take you up to God. God will clean you up and get you into some new clothes, okay? The boy nodded. Are you hungry? Oh yeah, Terry shared. Tony and Willa each grabbed a hand and they were gone. Bill Nation and Sarah Lopez came up holding hands. Where did the kids go? Billy asked. Up to God, the chief shared. Just then, 4 ex-Seattle police officers disappeared with the bodies of the convicts. The many other officers were moving the vehicles. There was a good place just south of the intersection of Highways 20 and 97 to temporarily park the 20 or so vehicles. How is the Marine Corps, Mr. President? Billy Nation asked. We have a full battalion of the 1st Marines trained, and they are stationed along the Alaskan coast with 2 aircraft carriers on the way from Hawaii. The Marines are watching the North Koreans. A few more Canadian provinces have asked permission to become part of the new U.S. and are willing and have agreed to move many of their forces into position to support ours if the need arises. The kids came back. They were all dressed in Robin Hood costumes. The girls, Willa included, all had short yellow lace skirts with a leather overskirt and matching leather vest covering a yellow lace blouse. They all had boots that came up past their knees. Everyone had a pointed green cap. The boys all had green tights with leather vests. They too wore boots. Tony and Willa joined the men. Billy pulled Willa away a bit. Willa, I would like to introduce Sarah Lopez to you. Sarah, this is my daughter Willa. Sarah glanced at John, then said to all, I've seen this in a vision. OMG, I dreamed this too. We would meet on the bridge and someday I will call you Mom, Willa shared. She turned to call for Tony. Tony, what are you doing? Tony was on one knee. Will you marry me? Tony was holding up a gold band with a diamond mounted on it. He then proceeded to slip it onto Willa's finger. When? Willa was smiling and nodding. Sunday? Tony asked. Yes. Willa turned to see the smiling faces of her father and Sarah. Dad, is it okay? Willa, we see you and Tony as adults. Is this what you want? Billy Nation was hit hard as his daughter slammed into him. She was still holding onto Tony's hand, and Sarah was laughing as she helped him stand. Brad and Gloria were standing there watching. Gloria was looking at Brad very hard. Principal Parker was also observing what was going on. Gloria turned and gave the principal a very determined look.